This video is part of a full podcast, link in the description for the full podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Enjoy the video. So what is going on at Tottenham Hotspur? How have these summer signings done?
Yeah, it's been a decent start for the majority of them. I think a couple of them, as we've mentioned, have not been given fair game time, but for the majority of them, been good. Richarlison's definitely come in as a fan favourite. I think, personally, we overpaid for him maybe a tiny bit. 60 million, I think it was in the end, was a bit high. But personally, I think he's done okay since he's come in. Has just picked it up an injury, so we wait to see how bad that will be. Yeah. I think he was talking about yesterday possibly missing the World Cup. So again, that's a month or so. It not even been at Spurs. So a few goals from him would have been nice, a couple of more, but again, he's got to get used to the whole system, so that's fair enough to him. Basuma as well, I think for how much we paid for him, around 25 to 30 mil, that's a great signing. I mean, he was probably outside of the top six, maybe one of the best CDM/centre mids last season. When the news came through that we were in for him, I was like, wow, okay, we're making some good moves here. He played yesterday against Everton for about 30 minutes. I think that was probably his best 30 minutes he's ever played for us. He looked really good in that midfield, in that 3-5-2, so that clearly suits him more than positions that we've played. We also signed that Destiny Udogie from Udinese, but he went straight back on loan. But from what I've seen, he's got a few goals and assists from wing-back, but he's definitely one for the future, still only being about 19 or 20, so fair enough. He's one Conte sees in the long run. Spence, I know we've sort of spoken about a little bit. He's a real funny one. I mean, the fans are all for him. He came on yesterday, I think, for the second time in about the 93rd minute or something, so he may as well have not come on. But yeah, the fans are all for him. They want to see him. But Conte, for whatever reason, just does not play him. He has said in the past that he was a club signing, which I think is a bit unfair on Spence, because that's essentially saying, look, I didn't want you. You were the club's investment, not mine. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I just think that the options we have at right wing back, being Emerson and Doherty, are nothing short of shambolic. Doherty, to be fair to him yesterday, played quite well, or well by his standards, but Emerson just is unbelievably poor. We paid way too much for him. I'm not sure who facilitated that transfer and why it went through, but again, with him starting every week, it makes the fans think, why is Spence not getting game time? There's no way he's this poor. Just give him a shot. I don't know whether Conte's scared to give him a shot, or he just thinks that Emerson's his man for some reason.
Yeah, one man I do want to touch on that wasn't mentioned there, Perisic. How's he got on so far?
Yeah, he came with a lot of excitement, Perisic. I mean, we all know his quality. He's a league winner in multiple leagues. He's won a few trophies, World Cup finalist against France a few years back. He came with a lot of expectation. He looked like he was going to sign for Chelsea at one point, but then ended up coming to us. But I just think he's been playing well, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if he's met people's expectations. There's been a couple of times where a cross didn't go as he planned, or he's come back into the defence, or he's too far forward and not tracking back enough. But a player of his sort of stature and his ability, he always gives you a decent performance. I wouldn't say world class, but he's one of those players I'm happy that we have in the club. Fair
enough. We touched on Spence just there. I'll ask you two questions, but the first one surrounding just Spence here. If he isn't going to play, if Emerson and Doherty are the two main options at right back, would a loan maybe suit him? I'm sure Forest would take him back on loan because they just love signing players. You know, possibly Wolves might want him as, you know, in that right back sort of position. Would a loan in January could be something that you could look at as a club if Conte really doesn't want him?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an option. As you say, I'm sure Forest would take him back, as they've actually currently got ex-Spurs man Sergio Aurier, so he can't be much worse than him. But yeah, I think definitely if it comes to January and Spence still hasn't got much game time, I think he's going to try and push for that loan move, definitely, because a player of his age, he's still young, sort of late to sort of early 20s, I think he is. So a player of his ability and his expectation, he needs to be playing. And possibly going back to Forest could be the answer.
Fair enough. And then, obviously, talking about that sort of right back, right wing back position, in your opinion, not what Conte does, because obviously Conte looks like he wants to play Emerson there, who would you start at right wing back?
I do my predicted lineups every week, and I normally do, or my preferred lineups, and I normally do the same person every time. I actually put Perisic there.
Okay.
Because Perisic is a double-footed player. He can use both feet, and he has played right wing back at Inter before. So I think a player of his quality, they could adapt to that role if he was played there. But if we're talking sole right wing back, then I'd start Spence any day of the week.
Okay, fair enough. So it would be Spence. Wow, Conte, if you're listening, wake up and give Jed some game time. Maybe, you never know. Maybe he's a friend of Neil Warnock and didn't like the whole abuse last season between them two.
Yeah.
We've touched on outgoings, obviously, in potential outgoings which could happen through Spence leaving in January on a loan. Going back to the summer, the players that you let go both on loan and permanently, are there any of them which you wish you would have kept?
In all honesty, no. I think the squad we have now is good. I just think the players that we let go, it just didn't work for them. I think with Ndombele and Lo Celso, they're two players that everyone at the club had massive expectations for, given their price tag. And they're both players that everybody wants to see succeed. Like any player that comes into the club, every fan every time will give them the benefit and sort of say, look, we want you to succeed and we want you to perform. But they were here for sort of 2 to 3 years and did not do too much. So I think them being loaned out was the correct decision. If we do get a good offer for them in the future, I could happily see them being moved on. Then you have other players like Reguilon. He hasn't been to the club as long as they have, but I think with him it was a breath of fresh air from Ben Davies. So when he came in and played under Jose and we played 4 at the back, having him at left back was like, wow, we haven't seen this in a long time. But under Conte's style, I just don't think he fits that wing back role. Similar with Emerson on the other side, I don't think he's a right wing back. He's more of just a full back. But yeah, and then you have other players like Joe Rodon, who went out on loan, I think, to Rennes in the end.
Yeah.
He's one of those players that, again, just hasn't had enough game time. He's looked okay when he's come on in a couple of matches he played for us, but he didn't get a lot of game time at all. And I think he was probably one of those players that was pushing for that loan move because he knew he needed sort of more football to, again, he's got the World Cup to think about.
For sure. And Rodon is the one that I actually see a lot in. I really like Rodon. I thought he was really good when he was at Swansea, I want to say. He was somebody in the summer that I was a Leicester fan, was going, go sign him, he's available on a loan. But again, if we're not going to spend money, we're not going to bring in loans for some reason, which don't cost anything. We've spoken about transfers, and the main man that has obviously been around these transfers is Paratici. Now, this man is a man that works in mysterious ways. He came in 2 summers back now, I believe, coming in and almost, got Nuno in, which was an interesting decision, shipped him out pretty quickly and then got his man in, Conte. How's Paratici done, and how much is he involved with the transfers himself? How much have you sort of made of him, and just how good is this mysterious bloke?
Yeah, Paratici is a very quiet one behind the scenes, but you can see how much influence he has on certain areas of the clubs. He's on the bench nearly every week, screaming and shouting at the players and stuff like that. But yeah, behind the scenes, he's definitely pulling a lot of strings. The majority of our business sort of seems now to be with Italian clubs. For example, sort of Romero, you had Kulusevski and Bentancur as well, all coming from Juventus and Atalanta. So he does like that Italian sort of style play, and to be fair to him, it's worked out really well for us. And then you also touched on Nuno as well. I think with Nuno coming in, I don't believe that was much of a Paratici decision. I think he went along with it And then when it didn't work, that proved his point to Levy, and he said, look, we need Antonio Conte. Conte's your best option here. Conveniently, they were best mates, so it's, I think, pretty easy for him to get him in, get his friend a job, but look how well it's paid off for us.
Fair enough. He's a man that I see Fabrizio Romano talk about a lot as well. You know, obviously Romano being Italian, always going, this is a man that will just chase 10 targets at once and then at the final minute choose one of them, which is painful when you're trying to get the big news story. You know, as I'm not quite there into that sort of field yet, but for those journalists who are trying to go, they're interested in this player, they could come out and say they're interested in 10 attacking midfielders, and everyone would go, what? No, they're not. Shut up. They are.
Yeah, it's very difficult to, again, sort of, I'm posting all the transfer news, and there's a new one coming out every 5 minutes, and everyone's like, oh no, this is fake news, this is fake news. You think, it's actually not. Paratici just has his fingers in so many different pies. It's almost unbelievable. Yeah,
he's a man that he's a man that interests me a lot, and Spurs are a club now that every transfer window I'm keeping an eye on, because they'll do something crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, in the summer you brought in some really big household names early on. That Richarlison deal, which we've already touched on, a lot of money. But considering Everton spent £50 million on him a couple of years back, you can understand why you had to spend so much, because they obviously weren't going to make a loss on him. You know, Perisic, household name when he came in, stealing him away from Chelsea as well. And, I mean, you're just such a club. It's really nice to watch when your club's making transfers.
Yeah, I think with our club, we definitely seem to make the most transfers during the window. We don't sign huge players like your Erling Haaland or your Darwin Nunez for those astronomical fees, but we always seem to sign a lot of players for those sort of 15 to 20 million price tags, which is good to see. But again, you get the odd season where we do sign that Richarlison or that Ndombele for a big fee. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, we'll move on to Paratici's best mate here in Antonio Conte. Now, where do I start? He's a man that nearly came in that summer that we've already touched on. Came out with the post with him standing next to an English seal, whatever it was in the end, which got you guys all into an absolute frenzy, and all I could see everywhere was Conte's coming, he's coming to Spurs, he's coming. And then he came and conquered, kind of. And now every 3 days there seems to be a link with him leaving. Why? And what are your thoughts on the whole thing as a whole, and do you think he will go?
Conte leaving will not happen. I'm telling you now. I think from what I've seen, it's basically Juventus journalists that are mortified by their start to the season. They're angry with their club, with having Allegri in, who's been pretty poor since he came back to the club. And they're essentially just trying to convince themselves that Conte would be willing to come back to the club and take them to the top of the league and win the league again. I do think they're in absolute dreamland. I mean, you've got top Spurs journalists like Alistair Gold reporting that Conte is willing to sign a new contract. All he needs is the club to make him the offer. So I seriously can't stress enough to Spurs fans, I don't think Conte will leave. Not at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Just to humour me here, if he did go, massive if, but if he did go, who could replace him?
I see many fans mentioning Poch's name. Don't get me wrong, Poch, one of my favourite managers in recent Spurs history. He took us again to that Champions League final. He took us close to the league title. He probably did what no other manager for us has done with the squad he had. We didn't have the greatest squad. We didn't spend the most amount of money. But I feel like a reunion for him could almost, as I say, go a bit like Allegri, where he comes back and it just doesn't feel the same. If we were to go with someone, as I mentioned earlier with Wolves, that Julian Lopetegui, he's just a manager that really interests me. I think when we were linked with Conte after Nuno went, he was a name that was sprouted around a little bit. But I really would be interested to see his football at the club.
Okay, fair enough. Lopetegui then would be the answer. I mean, I'll throw one at you, and you can bat this down if you like to. Diego Simeone.
I actually would be quite interested in him. Whether he'd leave Atletico or not, I'm not sure. But his mentality, similar to Conte, that sort of ruthless mentality where if your player doesn't give 100%, they're out kind of mentality. I would be interested to see him at the club. He's one of those managers that shows passion. He doesn't sit back and just sort of let things happen. He deals with situations. So yeah, he's a good one.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on to the current season. You're doing fairly well as a club. You're looking like you're going to push for Champions League football. For those that haven't been following Spurs too closely, how has the season started?
Yeah, we've had a good season in terms of results for sure. We sit third as we speak in the table. We're top of our Champions League group as well. The football itself hasn't been amazing. I'm a season ticket holder this year, my first season ticket, so I've been to all of our games at home this season, and we've played some good football, but we've also played some poor football, and this comes all in the space of about 20 minutes during one game. We seem to fluctuate big time. We go in sort of waves where we have a great 10 minutes and then a dismal 10 minutes and 20 minutes. But in terms of results, we can't complain. I'd rather take a 1-0 with some poor football than play well and lose 3-0 or something like that. So I don't think we can complain where we sit at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. And then before we round off this, I want to look ahead to the rest of the season for Spurs, not for that big month where we've got everything off and we're all going into a frenzy to watch England get knocked out in the round of 16 to Uruguay. How is the rest of the season going to go for Spurs? Will Champions League football happen? Brace yourself. Are you going to win a trophy?
Yeah, there's always the T word that comes into the question every season with Spurs. I mean, it's been too long now. I would have been about 7 or 8 the last time we won a trophy. So it's something that I want to see at some point. But yeah, I think the usual aim for Spurs is to get top 4 nearly every season. And the way we're going at the moment, it looks like we should. I mean, we're playing decent-ish football, as I just touched upon. So I think it will be, if we keep it up after the World Cup, I think we'll be okay. Kane's playing well. Son still needs to find that little bit of form, but I'm sure in time that will come to him. But as for other cup competitions, I think we need to just try and push as far as possible in them all. I think to win a trophy in Conte's first full season, because we've got to remember he only came in about this time last year or 11 months ago. To win a trophy, even if it was the Carabao Cup or FA Cup, we'd take that in a million years. Obviously, we had that chance with against City a few years ago, which we didn't take because we sacked our manager a week before a cup final, which still to this day confuses me. But yeah, I think a trophy like that would be possible if we get a good route to the final. And then we come to the Champions League. Again, the quality of teams this year is great. I mean, even for some of the underdogs, I think Club Brugge have qualified already. They're playing really well. So I think we'll make it to the quarters, but unfortunately, I just can't see us getting past there.
Okay, so quarters for the Champions League. Can I get a placement for the Premier League and the predictions for both of the domestic cups?
Yeah, for sure. So if we're going off current form, Premier League, I'm going to go for third. I do think that City will win the league, so I think third is probably about right for us, depending on whether Chelsea or Liverpool can get back up to form. I think we could go to probably the semis or the final, but again, it is Tottenham at the end of the day. So if we get a good run, I think the final. If we're lucky, probably the semis. Okay,
fair enough, mate. That will round off the first of the 2 Tottenham Hotspur segments.